The video footage was grainy, shaking violently as the phone camera zoomed in, but the audio was crystal clear. It captured the sickening sound of a skull cracking against an armrest and the gasp of 100 horrified passengers. In that chaotic moment on the tarmac of Chicago O'Hare, Captain Roger Stutton and flight attendant Brenda Miller believed they were simply removing a non-compliant passenger to make room for a VIP. They thought they were untouchable gods of their aluminum kingdom. They didn't realize that the man they were dragging down the aisle, bleeding and unconscious, wasn't just a passenger. He was the one man who held the pen that could sign their airline's death warrant. By the time the sun rose the next morning, Summit Airways wouldn't just be facing a lawsuit. They would be staring down a $40 billion collapse that would go down in history. The rain battered the reinforced glass of Terminal 3 at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, creating a gray, weeping curtain over the tarmac. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale coffee-wet wool and the frantic energy of delayed travelers. For Dr. Andre Bishop, the noise was just white static. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke charcoal suit, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't frantic. He was exhausted. Andre had spent the last 72 hours in a windowless conference room in Tokyo, negotiating the final logistical frameworks for a trans-Pacific trade agreement. He was 52 years old, with a touch of gray at his temples and eyes that had seen every trick in the corporate playbook. He didn't look like a titan of industry. He didn't wear flashy watches or brandish his status. To the casual observer, he looked like a weary university professor, or perhaps a mid-level manager returning from a grueling seminar. He glanced at his boarding pass. Summit Airways, Flight 492, to New York, Seat 1A. He just wanted to sleep. He wanted a glass of bourbon, a reclining seat, and silence until the wheels touched down at JFK. He approached the gate, his roller bag gliding silently beside him. Clear's throat. Boarding first class and Diamond Medallion members only. The gate agent announced, her voice tiny over the PA system. Andre stepped forward. He handed his pass to the agent, a young man who scanned it without looking up. The machine beeped. Clear's throat. Green. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Bishop." Andre nodded and walked down the jet bridge. The transition from the humid terminal to the climate-controlled cabin was immediate. He stepped onto the plane, greeted by the soft jazz music Summit Airways played to soothe passengers before they crammed them into metal tubes. Standing at the galley was Brenda Miller. She was the lead flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s with hair sprayed into a helmet of blonde rigidity and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She scanned Andre up and down, her gaze lingering on his shoes. Sensible, comfortable loafers, not the shiny Italian leather she associated with the occupants of Seat 1A. "Boarding pass?" Brenda asked, her hand extended palm up. Andre paused. He had just shown it at the gate, but he retrieved it from his jacket pocket again. "Here you go." Brenda took it, staring at the paper as if trying to decode a cipher. She looked at the seat number, then back at Andre, then back at the paper. Her lips pursued into a thin line of disapproval. She muttered almost to herself. She handed it back, not making eye contact. "First seat on the left. Overhead bins are reserved for first-class luggage only. If your bag doesn't fit, we'll have to check it." "It will fit," Andre said softly. He had flown 3 million miles in the last decade. He knew exactly which bag fit in which overhead compartment on a Boeing 737-800. He stowed his bag effortlessly and settled into the wide leather seat. He declined the pre-flight champagne, accepted a bottle of water, and closed his eyes. The cabin began to fill. The shuffle of footsteps and the clatter of bags filled the air, but André tuned it out. He was already drifting, his body heavy with jet lag. He was nearly asleep when a sharp tap on his shoulder jolted him awake. André blinked, disoriented. Brenda Miller was looming over him. Behind her stood a young man who looked to be in his mid-20s. The young man was wearing a hoodie that likely cost more than a Honda Civic, distressed jeans and sunglasses, despite being indoors. He was chewing gum loudly and tapping a platinum credit card against his thigh. This was Preston Gentry. "Sir," Brenda said, her voice louder than necessary, "I need to see your boarding pass again." André sat up, rubbing his face. "Is there a problem? We just need to verify the manifest," she said, her tone clipping the ends of her words. Boarding pass. André sighed, reaching into his pocket. He produced the crumpled slip of paper. Brenda snatched it from his hand. She stared at it, then tapped a long, manicured fingernail against a device in her other hand. "There seems to be a duplication error," Brenda announced, straightening her back. "This seat is double booked." "That's impossible," André said calmly. "I bought this ticket 3 weeks ago. I checked in online yesterday. I scanned it at the gate 5 minutes ago. Technology glitches happen," clears throat, Brenda said dismissively. She gestured to Preston, who was smirking. "Mr. Gentry here holds a platinum key status with Summit Airways. His ticket also reflects seat 1A. Since he is a priority member and there is a conflict, the system defaults to the higher status." André looked at Preston. The kid offered a mock salute with 2 fingers. "Sorry, Pops. Legroom calls. I am not a-moving," André said, his voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a shout. It was the rumble of a heavy engine starting up. "I paid for this seat. I am seated in this seat. The boarding door is about to close. Find Mr. Gentry another seat." Brenda's fake smile vanished. The mask dropped, revealing the irritation beneath. "Sir, first class is full. Economy is full. We have a jump seat available in the back, or we can rebook you on the flight tomorrow morning. I have a board meeting in New York at 8 RO. André said, "I am not taking a flight tomorrow, and I am certainly not moving to a jump seat, so this child can stretch his legs." "Excuse me." Preston stepped forward, pulling his sunglasses down his nose. "Do you know who my father is? My dad is golfing buddies with the vice president of operations for this airline. If I say I want 1A, I get 1A. I don't care if your father is the King of England," André replied, turning his attention back to Brenda. "Check your manifest again. My name is André Bishop. I am the confirmed passenger." Brenda leaned in, invading his personal space. "Listen to me, sir. We don't want a scene. You are currently trespassing on a seat that does not belong to you. I am giving you a polite option. Grab your bag, move to the rear, or get off the plane. Those are your choices." André looked around. The other first-class passengers were watching. A woman in 2B looked sympathetic, but terrified to speak up. A businessman in 1C was pretending to read his tablet, but his eyes were darting over. "I'm not doing either," André said, fastening his seatbelt. The click echoed in the silent cabin. "I suggest you go to the cockpit and tell the captain he's ready for pushback." Brenda's face turned a blotchy shade of red. She wasn't used to a no. She was used to compliance. She was used to passengers shrinking under the weight of her authority. "Fine," she spat. "Have it your way." She turned on her heel and stormed toward the cockpit, brushing past Preston. "Wait right here, Mr. Gentry. We'll handle this." Preston leaned against the bulkhead, crossing his arms. You're going to regret this, buddy. Nobody tells me no. Andre closed his eyes again. He knew this wasn't over. He knew the type of rot that existed in corporate structures like Summit Airways. He just hoped they weren't stupid enough to escalate this. He was wrong. 5 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. The man who emerged had the square jaw and silver hair of a casting call pilot, but his eyes were hard and beady. Captain Roger Starton was a man who believed the stripes on his shoulder made him the sheriff of the sky. He had flown for 30 years, and in his mind, the plane wasn't a transport vessel. It was his property. Brenda whispered furiously into his ear, gesturing toward seat 1A. Stone nodded, his jaw setting. He adjusted his tie and marched into the cabin, his heavy boots thumping on the carpet. He stopped at row 1 and looked down at Andre with pure disdain. Sir Stutton barked. "I'm Captain Stutton. I've been informed you are refusing crew instructions." Andre didn't unbuckle. He looked up calmly. "I am refusing an unlawful request to vacate a seat I paid for, Captain. There is a difference. The difference is whatever I say it is." Stone snapped. "Under FAA regulations, you are required to comply with all crew member instructions. My lead flight attendant tells me you are being disruptive, aggressive, and making other passengers uncomfortable." "That is a lie," Andre said. "Ask the lady in 2B. Have I raised my voice? Have I been aggressive?" Stone didn't look at 2B. He didn't care about the truth. He cared about the schedule, and he cared about the VIP standing in the galley who was texting the VP of operations. Sarton knew who Preston Gentry was. He knew that making Preston happy meant a good review in his file. Keeping a random nobody happy meant nothing. "I don't have time for a debate," Stanton said, checking his watch. "We are losing our departure slot. You are now a security threat. I am ordering you off my aircraft." "On what grounds?" Andre asked. "Belligerence," Stutton said. "Insubordination. And quite frankly, I don't like your attitude. You think because you bought a ticket, you own the place. You don't. I do." Captain Andre said, his voice deadly serious. "I am giving you one chance to de-escalate this. Check the name on the manifest, Andre Bishop. If you remove me, you are making a mistake that you will not be able to undo." Stan laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Is that a threat? Are you threatening a pilot?" "It's a statement of fact." Stone turned to Brenda. "Call the airport police. Tell them we have a level 2 disturbance. I want him dragged off." "Roger that, Captain," Brenda said, pulling out the interphone handset with a smirk. The atmosphere in the cabin shifted from awkward to electric. Passengers in the economy section were craning their necks. Phones were starting to come out. The red recording lights blinked like distant stars in the dim cabin. "You're making a scene," the woman in 2B whispered to the captain. "He really hasn't done anything. He's just sitting there. Mind your business, ma'am, or you'll be joining him." Clear's throat. Stone snapped at her. She recoiled, shrinking back into her seat. Andre remained still. He knew the law better than Stoughton did. He knew that Summit Airways' contract of carriage had specific clauses about involuntary denied boarding. He knew they were violating 3 federal statutes right now. But he also knew that logic didn't work on men like Saturn. Stan was high on power, fueled by the presence of an audience. "You really want to do this?" Andre asked quietly. "I'm not doing anything," Stutton sneered. "Security is." 10 minutes passed. The plane sat at the gate engines idling. The air grew stuffy. Then 3 figures appeared in the jet bridge doorway. They were Chicago Department of Aviation officers, but they weren't the regular beat cops. These were the heavies officers called in when physical force was anticipated. Leading them was Officer Derek Cole. He was a slab of a man, his uniform straining against his biceps, his face a mask of bored aggression. He walked onto the plane, chewing on a toothpick. "Where's the problem?" Cole asked, his voice booming. "Sat 1A. Brenda pointed, acting the victim now, clutching her pearls. He refused to leave. He threatened the captain. Cole looked at Andre. He didn't see a 52-year-old logistics expert. He saw a black man in a suit who didn't belong. He saw a target. "All right, buddy," Cole said, slapping his baton into his palm. "Party's over. Let's go." "I have a right to be here," Andre said. "I have broken no laws. If you arrest me, you need to charge me." "What is the charge?" "Trespassing," Cole said. "Once the captain kicks you off, you're trespassing. Now are you going to walk or do I have to drag you?" Andre looked at the officer's name tag. D. Cole. He memorized it. He looked at Storn, who was standing with his arms crossed, looking smug. He looked at Preston Gentry, who was filming the whole thing on his phone. Laughing. "I will not walk," Andre said, "because I have done nothing wrong." Cole sighed a theatrical exhale of exaggerated patience. "I love it when they want to do it the hard way." He signaled the other 2 officers. "Grab him!" The chaos erupted instantly. One officer grabbed Andre's left arm, twisting it violently behind the seat. Cole lunged across the terrified businessman in 1C and grabbed Andre by the lapels of his jacket. "Get up!" Cole screamed, yanking Andre forward. Andre's seatbelt was still fastened. The force of the pull slammed his chest against the belt, knocking the wind out of him. Clear's throat. "Unbuckle him!" Cole shouted. The 3rd officer reached over and jammed his thumb into the release mechanism. The belt clicked open. "Get off the plane!" Cole roared. He didn't wait for Andre to stand. He grabbed Andre by the throat and the shoulder and hauled him out of the seat. Andre's leg caught on the armrest. He cried out in pain as his ankle twisted unnaturally. "Stop! You're hurting him!" The woman in 2B screamed. "Oh my God! Stop! Back off!" Staton yelled at the passengers. "Everyone stay seated!" Cole didn't stop. He threw Andre into the aisle. Andre tried to catch his balance, but his twisted ankle gave way. He fell hard, his head striking the metal frame of the aisle seat across from him. Crack. The sound was sickeningly loud. Blood instantly began to pour from a gash above Andre's eyebrow, blinding him in one eye. He groaned, disoriented, the world spinning. "He's resisting!" Cole shouted. Despite Andre lying semi-conscious on the floor, Cole drove his knee into Andre's back, pressing his face into the thin, dirty carpet of the aisle. He cuffed Andre's hands behind his back, ratcheting the metal so tight it cut into the skin. "Drag him out," Storn ordered, looking at the blood on the carpet with disgust. "And get a cleaning crew in here. I'm not flying with blood on the floor." Andre was barely aware of what was happening. He felt himself being lifted by his arms, his shoulders screaming in agony. His feet dragged uselessly behind him as they hauled him down the narrow aisle of the first-ass cabin toward the door. He passed Preston Gentry. The kid was still filming, a wide grin on his face. "Bye-bye, Grandpa." Preston Jared. Brenda Miller stood by the door, holding a sanitation wipe, looking at Andre as if he were a bag of leaking garbage. "Disgusting," she muttered. They dragged him onto the jet bridge. The cool, damp air hit his face. They dragged him all the way up the ramp, his expensive suit tearing his blood dripping onto the ribbed rubber floor. Inside the terminal, passengers gasped and backed away. A mother covered her child's eyes. They threw him onto a row of waiting chairs near the gate desk. Andre slumped over, gasping for air, blood dripping from his forehead onto his lap. "You stay there," Cole panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Paramedics are coming to patch you up. Then you're going to a cell." Andre blinked, wiping the blood from his eye with his shoulder since his hands were cuffed. He looked back at the plane. Through the window he could see the crew moving about. He saw Preston Gentry high-fiving the captain. The pain was searing, but through the fog of concussion, a cold, hard clarity began to form in Andre's mind. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He simply watched. He watched as the gate agent printed a new boarding pass. He watched as the door to the jet bridge closed. He watched as Summit Airways Flight 492 pushed back from the gate, carrying the people who had assaulted him, humiliated him, and treated him like livestock. They thought the problem was solved. They thought they had just taken out the trash. Andre spat a mouthful of blood onto the linoleum floor. "You have no idea," he whispered to the retreating plane. "You have absolutely no idea what you just did." The paramedics arrived, followed by a different police officer, a woman named Sarah Jenkins. She looked at Andre, then at the pool of blood, then at Officer Cole. "What the hell happened here, Derek?" she asked, her voice horrified. "He attacked the crew," Cole lied smoothly. "Had to subdue him." Sarah knelt beside Andre. She saw the cut on his head, the bruises forming on his neck, the twisted angle of his ankle. She looked into his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a criminal. They were the eyes of a man who was doing complex calculus in his head. "Sir," she said gently, "can you hear me? What's your name?" Andre looked at her. He spoke clearly despite his split lip. "My name is Dr. Andre Bishop. I need my phone and," clears throat, "I need you to record exactly what I am about to say." "Sir." "You need a hospital," Sarah said. "Phone first," Andre said. "Then hospital, then war." The fluorescent lights of the terminal swam above Andre's head. He was lying on the row of cold metal seats where Officer Cole had dumped him. The pain in his ankle was a dull, throbbing bass drum, while the gash on his forehead felt like a searing hot wire. Officer Sarah Jenkins was kneeling beside him, applying a pressure bandage to his head. Her hands were gentle, a stark contrast to the brute force of her colleague. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "This shouldn't have happened. Cole here. He gets carried away." "That wasn't carried away." Officer Andre mumbled his words thick. "That was an assault. A few feet away, Derek Cole was pacing already on his radio, spinning a narrative. Yeah, dispatch. Subject was highly combative. Tussled with flight crew. Had to take him down hard. He's got a little scratch on his head. Send EMS for liability check. Then I'm booking him for trespass and interference." "He's lying," Andre said to Sarah. "I know," she said, quietly. She looked over her shoulder at Cole, disgust on her face. Then she looked back at Andre. "Sir, you mentioned a phone. Is it in your bag?" Andre nodded slightly toward his torn suit jacket. "Inside pocket." Sarah gingerly reached in and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. The screen was cracked a spiderweb, radiating from the impact point where he had hit the floor. It was a $600 piece of glass and silicon, but right now it was the most dangerous weapon in Chicago. "Unlock it for me," Andre said. She held it to his face for the biometric scan. The phone unlocked. Go to contacts, Andre instructed, fighting the urge to pass out. Find Arthur Pendleton. Sarah's eyes widened. Everyone in the business world knew that name. Arthur Pendleton was the CEO of Omnicorp Global, a conglomerate so vast it had its own zip code in Manhattan. They owned shipping fleets, data centers, and the very logistics subsidiary Dr. Andre Bishop worked for. She tapped the name. The phone began to ring. It was 6:15 a.m. in Chicago, which meant it was 7:15 a.m. in New York. Arthur Pendleton would be awake. He was always awake. The call connected on the second ring. Andre. Pendleton's voice was grolly sharp and immediately suspicious. You're supposed to be in the air. We're signing the summit deal at 200. Don't tell me you're delayed. Arthur Andre said, his voice weak but steady. I'm not in the air. I'm on the floor of O'Hare Terminal 3. But why? I was just dragged off Flight 492 by aviation police at the behest of Captain Roger Staton. They needed my seat for a VIP's kid. There was silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't an empty silence. It was the sound of a massive, powerful intelligence processing new data. Define dragged, Pendleton said coldly. Concussion, split forehead, likely a broken ankle torn rotator cuff. I'm handcuffed to a chair, bleeding on the floor. Another silence, longer this time. Who is the carrier again? Andre Summit Airways. The airline, we are about to sign a $40 billion exclusive cargo contract with this afternoon. The very same. Andre heard a deep exhale on the other end of the line. It was the sound of a dragon waking up. Andre Pendleton said, his voice frighteningly calm. Are you medically stable? I will be. Good. Do not say another word to the police. Do not sign anything the airline gives you. I am mobilizing the New York legal team. They will have partners on the ground in Chicago within 2 hours. I'm also waking up the head of our media relations department. Arthur, Andre said, closing his eyes as a wave of nausea hit him. Burn it down. Consider it scorched earth, my friend. Hang tight. The line went dead. Andre let his head drop back against the metal seat. He looked at Officer Jenkins. Thank you, Sarah. Mr. Bishop, she said, looking at the phone with awe. I think Officer Cole just made the biggest mistake of his life. Up in the sky, cruising at 35,000 feet, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 492 was strained. Captain Sutton had made a Foley announcement about dealing with a security issue and apologized for the delay. Free drinks were flowing rapidly. Preston Gentry was reclining in seat 1A, his long legs stretched out. He was editing the video he had taken on his phone, adding humorous captions and filters. He posted it to his Instagram story to his 50,000 followers with the caption, "When the boomer won't move, you make him move." VIP Life, Summit Airways, by Felicia. He had no idea that within 20 minutes, that video would be ripped, shared, and reposted by thousands of people, not as a joke, but as evidence of an atrocity. Brenda Miller was hiding in the galley, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared coffee. The image of Andre's blood on the carpet kept flashing in her mind. She tried to rationalize it. He didn't listen. The captain gave an order. It's not my fault. But the sick feeling in her stomach wouldn't go away. Staton was in the cockpit, feeling the adrenaline rush of absolute power. He had exerted his authority, and the system had backed him up. He felt untouchable. None of them knew that the man they had brutalized was the linchpin of their airline's future financial solvency. They didn't know that the gears of their destruction had already begun to turn lubricated by the blood Andre Bishop had left on their carpet. By 9 a.m. Central Time, the internet was on fire. It wasn't just Preston's video. Passengers in economy who had a clear view down the aisle had filmed the entire extraction. The footage was undeniable. It showed a calm man being ripped from his seat, his head slamming into the armrest, and then being dragged like a sack of potatoes, limp and bleeding, past horrified onlookers. The hashtags began to trend immediately. Noah Summit, Horror, Boycott, Summit. Rohan Justice for Sitwe in the glass and steel headquarters of Summit Airways in Dallas, Texas. The mood shifted from typical Monday morning grogginess to full-blown panic. Charles Whitmore, the CEO of Summit Airways, was a man built for PowerPoint presentations and shareholder dinners, not crisis management. He was staring at a large monitor in the executive boardroom watching CNN. They were playing the footage on a loop. How did this happen? Whitmore demanded, his perfectly tanned face paling. Who is the passenger? His VP of Public Relations. A nervous woman named Deborah checked her tablet. Initial reports from the crew said he was belligerent, a security risk. The police report mentions trespassing. He doesn't look belligerent in the video. Deborah Whitmore yelled, pointing at the screen where Andre was being dragged unconscious. He looks half dead. Do we have a name? We're still trying to confirm. The door to the boardroom burst open. Clear's throat. It was Barry Keegan, the VP of Strategic Partnerships. He looked like he was having a heart attack. His tie was loosened and he was sweating profusely. Barry, what is it? Whitmore asked, annoyed at the interruption. Clear's throat. The Omnicorp deal. Keegan gasped, bracing himself on the mahogany table. Whitmore relaxed slightly. Oh, thank God. Some good news. Is everything ready for the two-owner of PM signing that $40 billion is going to save our Q3 earnings? Keegan shook his head violently. No, Charles, you don't understand. I just got off the phone with Arthur Pendleton's office, and the deal is off. The room went deathly silent. The hum of the air conditioner suddenly seemed incredibly loud. Off. Whitmore whispered. What do you mean, off? We have a memorandum of understanding. We've been negotiating for 18 months. Pendleton tore it up. Keegan said, his voice trembling. He said, Summit Airways is a toxic brand run by barbarians. Why? Whitmore stood up, confused. Because of this incident in Chicago, we can smooth that over. We'll issue an apology. Give the guy some free miles. Pendleton is a businessman. He won't throw away $40 billion over a PR scuffle. Keegan looked like he was about to be sick. He pulled up a photo on his phone and slid it across the table to Whitmore. It was a headshot taken from a corporate website. It showed a distinguished black man in Clear's throat, a charcoal suit looking calmly at the camera. Below it read, Dr. Andre Bishop, Senior Vice President of Global Logistics Negotiations, Omnicorp Global. Charles Keegan said softly. The man in seat 1A, the man Captain Sarton had dragged off the plane this morning to make room for, who was it, some VP's kid? Whitmore stared at the photo. He looked up at the TV screen where the blurry, bloody face of the victim was being shown. He looked back at the photo. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. His knees gave out, and he sat back down heavily in his chair. That was Andre Bishop, Keegan confirmed, the man coming to New York to sign the contract. Whitmore put his head in his hands. Oh my God, we didn't just drag a passenger. We dragged our biggest client. Pendleton isn't just cancelling the new deal. Keegan continued delivering the final blow. He's pulling all existing Omni-Corp cargo contracts, effective immediately. That's 60% of our freight revenue gone by lunchtime. Whitmore looked at the stock ticker running at the bottom of the CNN screen. Summit Airways SMA was down 4% already just on the viral video. When the news broke that the Omnicorp deal was dead, the stock wouldn't just dip, it would crater. Get Stone on the phone. Whitmore roared, his panic turning to fury. Where is that plane? It's landing at JFK in 20 minutes, Deborah said. Have airport security meet the plane, Whitmore ordered, and tell legal to draft termination papers for the captain and the lead flight attendant. I want their heads on spikes before they even get off the jet bridge. It might be too late for that, Deborah said, looking at her phone. CNN just confirmed that the FBI has opened a civil rights investigation into the incident. Federal agents are already at JFK, waiting for Flight 492. Flight 492 began its final descent into Kennedy International. The mood in the cabin had shifted dramatically during the 2.5-hour flight. Thanks to the in-flight Wi-Fi, nearly every passenger on board knew what had happened. They had seen the videos of themselves, heard their own gasps recorded on social media. They knew the man they saw dragged away was innocent. The glances directed at Brenda Miller were no longer differential. They were accusatory. Whispers followed her down the aisle. She hid in the galley, applying more lipstick, trying to maintain the facade. Preston Gentry was no longer smiling. His Instagram comment section had turned into a war zone. He was being doxxed. People had found his father's name, his college, his address. He had deleted the video, but the internet never forgets. He sat low in seat 1A, hoodie pulled up, wishing he was invisible. In the cockpit, Captain Satan was humming. He had radioed ahead for a priority gate. He was looking forward to a steak dinner in Manhattan. Tower Summit 492, established on the ILS for runway 4R. Staten transmitted. Summit 49 Tower cleared to land. You are instructed to taxi immediately to remote hard stand Alpha 7 upon arrival. Do not proceed to the gate. Acknowledge. Staten frowned. Tower 492. Say again. We have a gate assignment. Terminal 4 Gate B23, negative 492. Your gate assignment is cancelled. Proceed to hard stand Alpha 7. Hold for ground authorities. This is a direct order from Port Authority and federal law enforcement. Staten's stomach dropped. Federal law enforcement. What did you do, Roger? His first officer asked, looking pale. You said he was a security threat. He was snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. He refused an order. The plane touched down smoothly, but instead of taxiing to the terminal, Satton was forced to turn toward a desolate stretch of tarmac, usually reserved for cargo planes or aircraft under quarantine. As they rounded the corner, the sight greeting them made Ston's blood run cold. It wasn't a baggage handler and a fuel truck. Surrounding hard stand Alpha 7 were 6 dark SUVs with flashing red and blue grille lights. 2 Port Authority police cruisers were there, and standing on the tarmac were a dozen individuals in navy blue windbreakers with bright yellow letters on the back, FBI. The plane came to a halt. The engines spooled down. The silence in the cockpit was terrifying. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarton announced over the PA, his voice shaking slightly. We have been directed to a remote stand for customs processing. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened. Agents will be boarding the aircraft shortly. A murmur of alarm rippled through the cabin. The forward cabin door opened. The stairs hadn't even been fully secured before 4 FBI agents boarded, led by Special Agent Kendra Shaw, a woman whose expression could freeze water. She walked straight past Brenda Miller, who was trembling visibly by the door. She walked past Preston Gentry, who was trying to shrink into the leather upholstery of seat 1A. She stopped at the cockpit door and banged on it with a fist. Staton opened the door. He tried to put on his captain face, the stern, authoritative look that had worked for 30 years. "Agent, what is the meaning of this delay?" "I have passengers to Captain Roger Staton." Agent Shaw interrupted her voice, razor sharp. "Yes, I am the commander of this. You are under arrest for deprivation of rights, under color of law, filing false federal statements, and conspiracy to commit assault. Step out of the cockpit now." "This is absurd," Ston spluttered. "That man was disruptive. I have authority under FAA regulation. Save it for the judge captain. Out now." 2 agents grabbed Staton, pulled him from the cockpit, and spun him around. The metallic snick of handcuffs echoed through the silent first-ass cabin. The exact same sound Andre Bishop had heard hours earlier. Agent Shaw turned to Brenda Miller. "Brenda Miller." Brenda nodded, mutely, tears streaming down her face on top of the layers of makeup. "You are also under arrest for conspiracy and providing false statements to federal officers." As they led the weeping flight attendant and the stunned captain off the plane, Agent Shaw stopped at row 1. Clear's throat. She looked down at Preston Gentry. "Preston Gentry." Preston looked up his sunglasses askew. "Look, I didn't do anything. The crew did it." "My dad knows the VP of your father," Agent Shaw said, with immense satisfaction, is currently giving a statement to the SEC regarding how his son obtained a platinum status ticket he didn't pay for. "It seems you've been flying fraudulently for 2 years. That's wire fraud, Mr. Gentry. Stand up. You're under arrest." Preston began to cry, a whining, childish, Clear's throat sound. The agents hauled him out of the seat he had stolen. As the 3 perpetrators were led down the portable stairs onto the wind-swept tarmac, the passengers on the right side of the plane pressed their faces against the windows. Someone in economy started clapping, then another. Soon the entire plane was erupting in cheers and applause as they watched karma arrive in the form of federal agents. Stone, shuffling in his handcuffs, looked back at his airplane one last time. He saw the passengers cheering his arrest. He knew with a sickening certainty that he would never fly again. The gods of the aluminum kingdom had been toppled. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago was a fortress of limestone and glass designed to intimidate. 6 months had passed since the incident on Summit Airways Flight 492, but the public's memory hadn't faded. If anything, the anger had calcified into a hard, dense demand for justice. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from every major network jostled for space in the gallery. Outside, protesters held signs reading, "No seat for racism and justice for Bishop." Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Roger Staton, Brenda Miller, and Derek Cole sat at the defense table. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Staton's expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 30 peltonsel. Brenda looked aged, her roots showing her hands constantly wringing a tissue. Officer Cole stared at the table. His jaw clenched, the arrogance beaten out of him by an internal affairs investigation that had stripped him of his badge and pension. The prosecution was led by Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Wright, a man known for a surgical, relentless style of cross-examination. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. He had the evidence. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Wright began pacing slowly in front of the jury box. The defense has tried to paint a picture of a chaotic situation. They have argued that Captain Sarton was acting out of an abundance of caution for the safety of his aircraft. They claim Officer Cole was simply following orders in a tense environment. They claimed Miss Miller was a frightened flight attendant caught in the middle. Wright stopped. He turned to the defense table and let a small, cold smile touch his lips. But we know that isn't true. And we know it because they told us themselves. A ripple of confusion went through the courtroom. Stone's defense attorney stiffened. You see, Wright continued. Captain Stoughton made a critical error. When the plane returned to the gate and was powered down by the FBI, the cockpit voice recorder, the black box, was secured as evidence. Usually these recorders loop over every 2 hours. But because Flight 492 never made it to New York, the conversation from the gate was perfectly preserved. Wright nodded to the Claire. Play Exhibit 4A. The courtroom speakers crackled with static. Then the distinct sound of the cockpit environment filled the room. Starting recording. God, look at him sitting there like he owns the place. Brenda recording. I told him to move. He's looking at me with those smug eyes. I hate that look. It's so entitled. Staten recording. Don't worry. We'll get him off. I don't care if I have to break his arm to do it. Who does he think he is? This is my plane. Preston Gentry. Faint background noise. Hey, Cap. My dad says thanks. Get this guy out of here, and drinks are on me in NYC. Staten recording. You got it, kid. Watch this. I'm going to call the cops and tell them he threatened me. That always works. They never question the pilot. We'll claim he lunged at you. Brenda recording, laughing. Make sure you sound scared when you call. Stan recording. Oh, I will. Let's teach this nobody a lesson about the pecking order. The recording cut off. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was heavy, oppressive, and damning. The jurors looked at the defense table with expressions ranging from shock to pure loathing. Staten's face was the color of ash. He stared at the table, refusing to look up. He knew it was over. The security threat defense had just evaporated. This wasn't about safety. It was about ego racism and a conspiracy to frame an innocent man. Sarton's lawyer closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. There was no coming back from this. But Wright wasn't finished. He called his final witness, Dr. Andre Bishop. Andre walked to the stand with a cane. His ankle had required 2 surgeries and 6 screws to reconstruct. A faint scar ran through his eyebrow, but he held his head high. He wore a suit as sharp as the one that had been ruined that day. Dr. Bishop Wright asked gently, "How has this incident impacted your life?" Andre adjusted the microphone. His voice was calm, resonating with a quiet dignity that filled the room. Physically, I will walk with a cane for the rest of my life. The nerve damage in my shoulder makes it difficult to lift my arm above my head, but those are just mechanics. He looked directly at Roger Stoughton. The real impact is the realization that no matter how hard I worked, no matter my degrees, my title, or my contributions to the global economy to men like Captain Satan, I was just a body to be moved. I was debris in his path. They didn't see a person. They saw an inconvenience. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I am also a businessman, and in business, when you make a mistake, you pay for it. Summit Airways. Captain Staten and the others. They made a calculation that day. They calculated that I was powerless, They calculated wrong. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged woman with stern glasses, stood up. Her hands were not shaking. In the matter of the United States of America versus Roger Stone on the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit assault, guilty. On the charge of filing false federal statements, guilty. The word guilty rang out 12 times. Staten, Miller, and Cole were convicted on every single count. The judge, the Honorable Sarah Vance, looked over her spectacles at the defendants before sentencing. Mr. Seighton, you were entrusted with the lives and safety of passengers. You used that authority as a weapon to satisfy your own ego. You treated a human being like luggage. The malice you showed on that recording is chilling. I sentence you, Roger Staton, to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Furthermore, I am forwarding a recommendation to the FAA for the permanent lifetime revocation of your pilot's license. Ston slumped forward, burying his head in his arms. He sobbed a broken, pathetic sound. The god of the sky was clipped and grounded forever. Brenda Miller received 4 years. Derek Cole received 6. Preston Gentry, who had pleaded guilty early in exchange for leniency, received a suspended sentence and 5,000 hours of community service. But his punishment came in a different form. His father was fired from his executive role for the fraudulent ticket scheme. The Gentry family name was mud in social circles. Preston. Once the golden boy of Instagram was now unemployable, living in a small apartment, his platinum credit cards long cancelled. Justice had been served in criminal court. But the financial hammer was about to fall even harder. If the criminal trial was the earthquake, the civil lawsuit was the tsunami. With the criminal conviction secured, Summit Airways had no defense against Andre Bishop's civil suit, but the lawsuit was just the tip of the iceberg. The cancellation of the Omnicorp contract had triggered a domino effect. When Arthur Pendleton publicly severed ties, calling Summit morally bankrupt, other Fortune 500 companies followed suit. No one wanted their brand associated with the airline that dragged doctors off planes for VIPs. Within 3 months of the incident, Summit Airways stock had lost 70% of its value. They were bleeding cash. They tried to rebrand, launching a campaign called Summit Cares. But the internet ruthlessly mocked it. Every time they posted an ad, the comments were flooded with the image of Andre Bishop's bleeding face. Finally, 6 weeks after the criminal sentencing, the news broke on a Tuesday morning. Breaking news. Summit Airways files for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy protection. CEO Charles Whitmore resigns. The airline, a giant of the skies for 40 years, collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. It was eventually bought out for pennies on the dollar by a rival competitor, who immediately dissolved the brand, repainted the planes, and fired the entire executive leadership team. The name Summit Airways ceased to exist. It was erased from the sky. As for Dr. Andre Bishop, he didn't just walk away with a settlement. The jury awarded him $150 million in ORSAPs, in compensatory and punitive damages, one of the largest individual settlements in aviation history. But Andre didn't buy a yacht. He didn't retire to an island. 1 year after the incident, Andre stood at a podium in Chicago, not far from the airport where his life had changed. Behind him was a new building gleaming in the sunlight. When they dragged me off that plane, Andre said to the crowd of reporters and community leaders, "They tried to take my dignity. They failed. Today, we are opening the Bishop Center for Civil Rights and Corporate Accountability. He gestured to the building. This center is funded entirely by the settlement from Summit Airways. It will provide free legal representation to victims of corporate discrimination. It will fight for the nobodies that people like Roger Staton think they can push around. The crowd applauded. Among them was Sarah Jenkins, the police officer who had helped him that day. She was now the head of security for the new center hired by Andre personally. After the ceremony, Andre walked to his car. His ankle still stiffened in the cold, a permanent reminder of the metal screws holding his bone together. He checked his phone. He had a flight to catch. He was flying to London for a conference. He arrived at O'Hare. The terminal looked the same, but the atmosphere was different. As he approached the gate, flying the rival airline that had bought out Summit, the gate agent looked up. She recognized him. Clear's throat. Everyone recognized him now. "Doctor to Bishop," she said, her smile genuine and respectful. "It is an honor to have you flying with us today." "Thank you," Andre said softly. "We have you in seat 1A, sir. And I can personally guarantee that no one will be asking you to move." Andre smiled. It was a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He walked down the jet bridge, the cane clicking rhythmically against the floor. He boarded the plane. He turned left into the first-class cabin. He placed his bag in the overhead bin. It fit perfectly, just as he knew it would. He sat down in the wide leather seat. He stretched his legs out, wincing slightly, as his bad ankle settled. But then, relaxing the captain of this flight, a young man with a kind face, stepped out of the cockpit. He didn't loom over Andre. He extended a hand. "Dr. Bishop," the captain said. "Welcome aboard. We're glad you're here." "I'm glad to be here, Captain," Andre replied. The plane pushed back. The engines roared to life, the sound of power, of travel, of freedom. As the aircraft accelerated down the runway and lifted into the clouds, leaving the earth below, Dr. Andre Bishop closed his eyes. He had won. He hadn't just beaten the airline. He had fundamentally changed the world below him. The scars on his ankle and forehead were the price of admission. But looking at the clouds, he knew it was worth it. He was flying again. And this time the sky belonged to everyone. That is the story of how one man's quiet refusal to accept injustice brought down $1 billion empire. It reminds us that authority is not absolute, and that the little guy isn't always as powerless as he seems, especially when he has the truth, a smartphone, and the number of a billionaire CEO in his pocket. Andre Bishop proved that dignity is worth fighting for, and that sometimes karma doesn't just knock on your door, it tears the whole house down. What would you have done if you were in seat 1A? Would you have moved, or would you have held your ground? Like Andre, let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of Justice Clear's throat, served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next